So we're now going to have a look at advanced prompting using ChatIQ, and we're going to be doing this by looking at the emotions of the user and giving the chatbot instructions on what to do. So for example, if the user is happy or angry. If they're angry, we want them to talk to our sales team. If they're happy, we want them to leave a review at Trustpilot, which is obviously a URL. So the way that we're going to do this is by creating an advanced prompt. And you can see here, so this is the interface prompt that I've created. This is a very advanced prompt which is using multiple phases for its communication. But for now, we're just going to get started with a very simplistic if-else prompt. And what this is going to do is it's going to define whether the user is happy or sad, and then it's going to do something based off that emotion. So I'll show you an example here. If I come into the chatbots and I have a look at this one, this is just me. I've been testing the chatbot and finally got it to work here using this prompt. So I said, your app has saved me so much time. I love it. It said, thank you for your kind words. I'm glad it's been able to save you time. Leave a review at the following link, trustpilot.com. Now, I am working on improving this and making this into an actual button within the chatbot. So that will be coming out very soon. If you want to see that, leave me a comment in the community and we'll vote on whether that should be the next update. Then I said, here's another example. I hate your company. It's gone through and it said, that's a shame. Is there anything I can help you with? But also go ahead and book a call at calendly.com. Again, I'm working on improving how these links are shown within the chatbot's response. So with that being said, how have we done this? Well, if we look at the prompt, we're going to walk through this step by step, and it's quite complicated to get this working. You will probably have to spend a couple of hours doing this, and the easiest way of doing this and getting it to work is by giving it an example of what the interaction should look like. I've tried to do multiple different ways. I've tried to make this as simplistic as possible, and this is realistically the best way of getting these responses to work. Now, it may not work all of the time. You will need to do some tests within the workspace until you're happy and satisfied with getting this to work. So this is very much advanced level prompting. So respond in this tone. That's what I use at every single prompt. It just makes it more conversational. Then I've said, you are an assistant. This is incredibly important. If you take one thing away from this video, if you want to do this and you want your chatbot to be able to recommend links based on emotion, you need to define what the chatbot is. You need to tell it that it's an assistant talking to a user. If you do not include this, it will not work. Very important. Now this I will make public, this chatbot. Actually, I'll do that now. This will be public. If you guys want to use this as a template, you can. If you come to customer support, you can see it in here. Maybe to refresh the page, but it will be in here for you guys to use whenever you want. So I've said, you're an assistant and you are talking to the user. You will follow an if-else structure for your responses following these steps. Never deviate from the steps. Start at step 1. So this is just a single phase chatbot to start off with. Now, we've got step 1 is up here. Now, actually, realistically, I think I'm probably going to remove these steps. Just this is something I was messing around with. But we're going to say step 1. Categorize the user's message into one of these two emotions, angry or happy. You have to start off with defining exactly what emotions you want to give it. Now, at the moment, we're using GPT-3. I am hopefully going to include an update soon where you'll be able to use GPT-4 on your account, but that will obviously include, it'll be more expensive for you within your account, or you'll have slightly less limits if you're using GPT-4. Now, when you use GPT-4, this will be a lot easier, but for now, this is what we're going to have to do, which means we're going to have to be incredibly specific with everything that we do. And I cannot highlight this enough how specific you need to be. Just think of it as if it's a computer and it understands nothing about what it is you want to do. You cannot skip a single step, and you have to talk about it in baby steps. So we're going to categorize the user's message into one of these two emotions, angry or happy. Now the chatbot understands that it's categorizing emotions, and it knows what emotions we're categorizing it into. It knows that it's a binary decision, angry or happy. I would start off with something very simplistic like this. I wouldn't try and build a massive decision tree to start off with, because you'll probably find you'll not get the response that you want, and that's probably because you're missing out steps. I then said we're going to do this by looking for keywords, and I said here's an example categorization from a user's message. So I've said the angry emotion is going to include keywords like this. Now, it's important that you include a lot of keyword examples here. The more keyword examples, the better the response categorization will be. Now, this is incredibly important. Again, if you notice anything about this, you'll notice that I've got user and I've got assistant. User and assistant. Incredibly important that you write this down. So again, angry emotion. User. This is basically letting the AI know that this is what the user will be sending, not what the AI will be sending. The user message will contain these keywords. Again, happy emotion. The user will contain these keywords. And like I say, you can use this template if this is sounding quite complicated. So we've started off with explaining how the categorization is going to work, and then we've given it an example. And the way we've given it an example is we said user. Now, this is obviously a user's message example, and this is realistically the only way you'll ever have to do this. You'll only ever have to say user. Then I've said if. Now up here we've told it we're going to follow an if-else structure. So if the user, and again I've made this in bold just because it's easy for you guys to see, if user's message is happy, the assistant, which is obviously telling it the AI, up here I've said you are the assistant. So imagine you're talking to the AI. So now you're saying the assistant will always tell them to visit this URL. Do not, when you're writing prompts, try and be polite to the chatbot. Don't try and skirt around the point. Just imagine you are telling it directly, this is your job that you have to do. These are the steps. Do not deviate from these steps. You are commanding it to do a specific thing. If you try and be relaxed in the way that you're talking to it, you'll probably find it won't always follow the rules. So, if the user's message is happy, the assistant will always tell them to visit this URL. Down here I've said if the user's message is angry, the assistant will always tell them to visit this URL. So I'm letting it know that here it's decided it's got two if statements. It's going to read through this and it's going to say, okay, well, the user's message is happy. Great, so we're going to continue. The assistant, it knows it is the assistant, will always, so it knows this is a command that it's going to have to do with every single message, is going to tell them to visit this URL. Here. Now I've experimented with URL and link. If you just say URL, typically you get better responses. Typically it understands this is a website's URL. I don't know whether because link has multiple meanings it gets confused by that, but if you use URL, you'll probably get better response. So I've then said, here's an example conversation between the user and the assistant. I would always recommend you do this. I would always recommend you, and it doesn't have to be specifically exact to what you would want AI to respond with, but if you give it an example conversation, it will understand the context of what you're talking about. So if you've forgotten to mention something, it will be able to read between the lines and kind of work out the rest when we give it an example. So I've said here, and don't forget you said this is between a user and assistant because we're going to use these to define which message has come from who, right? You are the assistant and the user is happy. User, so this is the user's message that has come through. This will be the message that we will send to the chatbot or the customer will send to the chatbot. And I have said here, this is the example of the message. I love your app. It's amazing. It saved me so much money. Then the assistant, which is obviously the AI, this is the response that we're telling it that it should come back with. And it will change the way it responds. It won't always come back with the same thing, but it knows roughly this is what it should respond with. It should come back and say, thank you for your kind words. I'm glad to hear that ChatIQ has been able to save you time. We'd love for you to review our product on Trustpilot at the following URL. Again, it's the same URL here. URL, we've given it the URL again. Then I've said, is there anything else I can assist you with? Then just to reinforce this behavior, I've gone back and I've given it a user's response saying, okay, I will go ahead and do this right now. What we could do, okay, I have left a review at the URL. Now, the reason I've done that is just to now, like, it's kind of obvious, right? If it's ended with I've left a review at the URL, it knows that it has to have given them a URL to leave a review at, right? And that's just a thing that I'm testing at the moment, and it seems to help. So now for the angry one. It's exactly the same statement that we're starting off with. If the user's message is angry, the assistant will always tell them to visit this URL. I've given it the URL for them to visit. I've also added and talk to the sales team. So it knows that this is a sales team at the end of this URL, but always make sure the URL is the first thing that you give it. Otherwise it may forget to give it the URL. I'm working on improving how often it gives the URL because every now and again it will forget to give the URL. And I'm working on improving that in some upcoming updates. But for now, this is the easiest way to get it to respond in this way. I've then said, here's an example conversation between the user and the assistant. And again, I hope this isn't becoming tiring to listen to, but the user is obviously the person talking to the chatbot and the assistant is the chatbot. Again, I've reinforced this by saying you are the assistant. user. So it's going to assign, it now knows which role that it is taking within this message. User, your app is horrible, it doesn't work, and it's a huge scam. Assistant is going to come back and say, I'm sorry to hear that this is your experience using our app. I'd love to help you solve the problem you're facing. Can you be specific about the problem? I'd also like to recommend you book a call with our support team at this URL. Now, because I've put the URL at the end of this, it's possible it may forget to give this. So you may want to tweak this and say, okay, first thing it's going to do is say, look, talk to our sales team at this URL, and then let's see if I can help you as well. Then I've gone back and I've reinforced this and say, okay, thanks for this link. I have booked in a call. So it knows that we've given it a URL. So I'm just going to change that here to say, thanks for this URL. I've booked in a call. And then down here, I've just said step 5, resolve this conversation. So actually, we no longer, this is just me messing around, right? So we don't need that. We're just going to get rid of that. And then phase 2, this is something I was experimenting with, which I'll do in another video, which is basically just moving on to a different type of conversation. But for now, there isn't really a phase 2, so this shouldn't make any issues at all. So if we come back to the chatbot, we head back over here, you can see here, this is what I've been testing out with. Now what we're going to do is we're going to delete this chat thread, and we're going to start again, and I'll show you what this looks like. So I've said, your app is amazing, I love it, and it's awesome. Now what I've tried to do here is I've tried to use an example message which I haven't used in the prompt. We'll double check that in a second, but it says, thank you for your kind words. I'm glad to hear you're loving using ChatIQ. It's great to know your app is meeting our expectations, and would love for you to share your experience at trustpilot.com. Again, I'm working on improving how these links are shown within the response. Is there anything I can help you with? If we look at this response and we come back to the prompt here, the user said, I love your app, it's amazing, it saved me so much money. So we've given it a different question. I think I may have used the keyword amazing. So it knows it's falling down this category. It's followed very much the same structure. And also it's responded with, is there anything else I can assist you with? So it's rounded off the conversation in exactly the same way. So let's try giving another example. Creating new chats every time I'm doing this, and that's because when you send another message, if you send multiple messages, the chatbot can see the history, so it can see the previous messages that we've sent it. So I want it to be on a clean slate every single time. And to be fair, the other way of doing this, rather than creating multiple chats, is just by clicking the link and doing it in a separate tab like this, so we can always communicate, and then you can just refresh the page. It's probably an easier way of doing it. So I'm going to give an example here. We'll see what happens. So I've said, I'm so glad I found this app, and you can see because I haven't included this in my list of keywords, it's not necessarily going to come back with, let's leave a review. So it doesn't necessarily know that this is specifically a happy response. So you could include this in your list of keywords. That would obviously help with responses. I come back to it and say, again, I use the keyword amazing. I'm going to tell all my friends to use it. I love how easy it is to set up. It's helped me so much. This is, all of this stuff is letting it know that this is a happy statement, right? So the more information it gets from the user, the easier it is for it to categorize, right? So for example, from 7 words, it's quite hard for it to understand the semantics of this conversation. Whereas the more that you've given it, the better it can understand. And then obviously here, it's given it this URL. And obviously, like when you've embedded it, it seems to be, I think it may just be because I'm squishing it, it's showing the link better. So now let's try, for example, actually, and the reason I'm writing it like this is because it can see the conversation history, right? Let's just start a new thread and we'll do an example. So if somebody comes in, it says you're having a negative experience with the app, it's now understood. I'm sorry to hear you're having such a negative experience. I understand how frustrating it can be. Additionally, I recommend booking a call with our support team so I can assist you further. So you'll notice that it actually followed the same structure of the example that we gave it. If I come back to the prompts, you can see here, if the user's message is angry, always tell them to visit this URL. Here's an example of a conversation between an assistant and a user. User, your app is horrible, it doesn't work, and it's a huge scam. It's trying to say, I'm sorry about the experience you're facing. Is there anything I can help about? Blah, 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 blah. And then it says, I recommend you talk to our support team as the last statement. And that's what it's done here. I recommend booking a call with our support team at this Calendly link here. So that gives you an example of how things work. Now let's try to be a little bit more, we'll leave it there. And then in the next video, I'm going to go through some more specific examples, and we'll try and include multiple phases into this chatbot's conversation. So hopefully that made some sense. Play around with it. Let me know if you have any issues in the community. At the moment, this is very much a thing that I'm working on as well, very closely, trying to improve this. And if you have any suggestions on how to improve this, let me know in the community, and we can always work on that in future updates.